Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your Consciousness Transformation and Ascension Guide and the originator of Trinity Energy Progression. Welcome to this week's Living the Shift. Today we're going to talk about really a very pervasive and powerful theme that's been coming up with us energetically. And that is really the call to look at things differently, to find our level, our authenticity differently from what we have done to define it in the past. So what we're going to do, so I want to start with death because it's come up a lot lately. I'm actually going to pull up my phone because otherwise I don't see who comes on. Ooh, okay. So, and I wrote about this on my private Trinity Energy Progression Practitioner page on Facebook here. But I want to really go into this because there's so many levels of it. There's so much for us to talk about. And I'll start with, somebody prominent in the spiritual community in my area that I've known in passing, that we've sort of nodded at each other in passing and on the same path kind of thing, or whatever, that you would look at as somebody who's very successful, very prominent and confident and really getting out there, who died a what looks like a self-inflicted death. And that's it's not even important. It is important, but the important part is looking beyond this, right? It's a great lesson. And what happens is I think we're so used to being taken aback by death that we forget how to see the messages that come through it, right? So we get the ego. We're very tied to our physical presence with each other and to like judging like certain kinds of deaths. Oh, it was a peaceful death. It was a violent death. Oh, it was an untimely death. Things like that. But from my understanding, here's the thing. We all choose when we go at some level of consciousness. We all go to, good morning, Sandy. We all go to a place of from, the bigger plan of why we came here. And when we're done with it, we choose our exit plan. So in essence, we all commit suicide, whether it's somebody killing us, shooting us, whether we do it ourselves, whether, we're part of like I said, a violent crime or a terrible injury or a sickness or something like that. It doesn't matter. So when we take away all the 3D logistics, right, and we look at the bigger picture is, okay, so when we leave, it's usually because we're done or there's a need for us to go for whatever message we are to. Yeah, I'm so happy you joined me, Sandy. Or whatever message there is to get from that. And often it's messages to other people. So back to this individual who passed. And, I was looking at that. And there's something that came up. I have a tarot deck that is called the Fifth Element. And there's a card in it called the Shadow card. And it was interesting because I don't do reversals. I was guided to pick up this deck. I haven't picked it up in a long time. And I was shuffling it. This was like Monday. And it was even before I knew any of this. But I was shuffling it. And I when I split the deck to shuffle, I saw the Shadow card and it was upside down. And I was like, well, that's weird. So I turned it around. I know I turned it around, and then I put it back in, and I was shuffling the deck. And then the card actually fell out of the deck, and it was upside down. And I was like, oh, interesting. When that happens, I absolutely look at what that's supposed to be saying to me. And so, when anybody who does tarot decks, you have a reversal. It's sort of the opposite of what it tends to be the opposite or something hang up of what that energy of that card is about, right? So it was like, no, it's not the shadow card within, it's the shadow like without, right? Or how we express the shadow or how we're living the shadow through other people. Good morning, Laurel. And so, we if we get away from the judgment of dying, we want to look at what the messages are that come through. So let's look at this. So what I was looking at in terms of this individual's death is, okay, well, it was the exit strategy was surprising to many, and yet I think that was really what the shadow card was about, is why was it a surprise? So then it takes me into thinking and not thinking, feeling into it and looking at how we're connected or not connected. Like we think we're connected. And it's really interesting because we talk about this all the time in the spiritual world, but yet we tend to, like, we still have these layers that are still not 100% authentic. And it's all because of judgments that we have and beliefs that we have inside, right? So when we have somebody, so what I had written about was, I understand that as like, the originator of the practice and several hundred practitioners and everything else of Trinity Energy Progression. It's like, then people look up to you and they think that you're in a different plane. But the thing is, the practice is all about, we're all equal. We're all God. We're all the God, God, Goddess embodied. And it's whatever we're here to embody and fulfill in our own purpose. And so we're all equal in that respect. And we're also equal in terms of whatever we've chosen. We've all chosen to work some stuff out for the collective, for the individual, for this whole evolution, right? That's what whole Living the Shift is all about. So we say that and we talk about it. And then in something like this, you look at that from outside, and it really took me aback because it was not in terms of judgment of the death, but in terms of, so someone who was prominent, not somebody like, if somebody was depressed or they've had like a lot of issues or whatever, then, be like, oh, well, okay, that's horrible, but not completely unexpected. And this is apparently has come very unexpected for anybody who knew her closely or knew her, period. And I'm like, well, okay, and we're all working through whatever our stuff is. However, here's the thing, and I'm not judging the death. It is what it's supposed to be. The thing is, let's look at how we connect with each other, because we still have these judgments of who's better, who's got it all together, who, like we have these things, oh, you're more advanced, you're more in remembrance, you're a brighter light, you are this, you are that, whatever. And so what's interesting is, so like we can easily look at somebody who is not in one of those roles, right? But and sometimes it's easier to understand but then when somebody who takes, say, what a leadership role is, we go into a place of, okay, well, like it's this unspoken thing about the teacher and student, the leader and the follower, instead of realizing we're all leaders and followers and teachers and students. So even if I am here to teach a particular lesson or set of lessons, or to teach something to help you remember your own divinity, it doesn't make me any better. It doesn't make me beyond any other lessons. It doesn't make me impervious to like still egoic stuff, no matter how advanced we are. And it's, there's doubt, there's anxieties, there's sadness, and even with the understanding that it can be, that's from the ego, it's like, it's still there. So the thing is, and I'm not saying that this could have been prevented. The thing is, like I said, the biggest thing that was interesting to me was that so many people are shocked. So then what were those connected not connecting to, right? And here's the thing. We are all just as responsible for our own journeys. So what happens is, at this very subtle level, people start holding you up on a pedestal because they think you're whatever. And then you accept that at some level, even if you talk and act otherwise, right? There's still a little piece, if you accept it, to say, okay, and then they, and then that perpetuates that interaction, right? So then what happens is you get to that place of, oh, I have to play this role of this leader or this teacher or whatever. And now I have to hide my own what I believe are not my misgivings, but the things I'm working through or flowing through, which is funny because for us to all walk home together as the God goddesses we are, is for us to come together to recognize that as individual as these journeys are, and as intense and everything that's resolving with so many of us right now is, it's also collective. And we're doing it together. But what happens is we then perpetuate this. And it's funny, we can complain about it and say it doesn't, but you can accept it. And when I changed that within myself, it changed the nature of a lot of my relationships. And those relationships with people who just came to me as a teacher, came to me as their, guidance, or wanted to, went away. And they sometimes got really angry because I stopped playing that role, or I refused to play that role. But then what happens is you start building much more authentic kinds of relationships where it's like, okay, but we're in this together. And of course, I think you're amazing and you're God goddess. Of course, we're all of it, or the whole divine consciousness, whatever you want to call it, source, universe, whatever. And we're just this piece of us is embodied here, but we're all the same. When we start to really recognize that, we can really start to be authentic, A, with ourselves, and B, with each other. And the authenticity, these layers of authenticity, come from getting beyond what we believe are the roles we have to play, and that we have to lock ourselves into inauthenticity to play those roles. Because we can play the roles and still be authentic. Because as long as we know that it serves the bigger purpose of what it is we're here to fulfill or whatever. But it all starts to connect together. There's a lot of this that goes on. And Sandy says, yes, people get so dramatic about death. It's a beautiful transition of life and going beyond the veil of life in this reality. Right. It's like a graduation. I always look at it as a graduation. Even if I'm sad about whether it's a pet or a person, I always think, okay, well, they graduated. Yay for them. Sad for me if they're if they were a close part of my life, and that's the mourning that I do. But I also recognize that the mourning has to do with, for me, completely me, and has nothing to do with the person, because I recognize that they're free of the body. So, and Sandy says, I love being a God goddess. I used to struggle with this concept of being God incarnate. Yeah, many do, because we're so used to giving that away. So here's the thing. As much as we're all that, we're also just as much, flowing through these amazing lessons, flowing through these amazing set of duality-based experiences. And so how do we navigate that? That's the question, right? So then how do we do it differently? How do we start to connect better is the question that it's time for us to ask ourselves, right? Because I have committed myself a long time ago to really constantly observing my interactions, observing where I am, observing what I do, and I commit myself to authenticity. Now, the thing that's really interesting about authenticity is, and Sarah, who's on here, I saw her on here. She and I do our Monday podcast together, The Ascended World. And we talked, and it started this week, was about the many layers of authenticity, right? And then this all came around after, as well as it's funny, it's amazing how it all aligns. But we were talking about how authenticity is only, like, we believe we're authentic. We are authentic. Like, even when we commit ourselves to authenticity, we're as authentic as we are in a space of unconditional love for ourselves in that moment. So the more we expand on that and allow that, the more we're authentic in a different way. So my authenticity 6 months ago is much different than my authenticity today, or even 2 weeks ago, or 6 years ago. So even with that commitment, it's like, because I'm in the place where I allow myself my divinity, right? And the more I do that, the more authentic I can be, because the more we can be in that place of unconditional self-love, the more we connect with other people, because I trust my guidance, I trust my connection, I trust your journey, and I honor it. And if one day I wake up and I get this, oh yes, I love that, Sarah, authenticity evolution. That's fabulous. I love that term. It is an evolution of our authenticity. And as we progress in that, right, it's more and more this place of being versus doing. Like, I don't have to do a role. I can just be. And I can, if I'm so guided from higher consciousness in this perception of wholeness, then I can be this today and I can be that tomorrow or this hour or next hour or whatever. And so when we allow that, where was I going with this? The authenticity, the unconditional love. Oh, the connection. When we do that, then we stop making judgment. Like, so here's the thing. Sometimes we say, I'm going to call this person because they've been down. Okay. And that's fine. But as we go, it's fine to start there. And as we go, we start to listen to our inner guidance. And there are times when I literally, with no judgment, with no emotion attached to it, I will be sitting someplace or I'll be, doing something, and I will clearly feel, call this person. Call this person. And I have no idea why. And like more times than not, like actually 99% of the time, I'll call them and they'll be like, oh, either I was thinking about you, I needed to talk to you, or after we have a conversation, it's like, oh, I'm so glad we had this conversation because I really needed this talk. I've had so many synchronistic situations where, like, one time I called somebody I thought I called somebody accidentally instead of somebody else, but then they really needed to talk to me at that moment. We ended up doing like this energy share, like impromptu. It was really funny. But when we do that stuff without judgment, a lot of times that's the whole thing. I think I'm going to call this person because they need it, or I'm not going to call this person because they don't need it. And that goes back to this whole like connection to those people who we think, oh, you have it all together, it's all easy for you, blah, blah, blah. But if the guidance is, I'm going to reach out to so-and-so today, not I should or I have to, it's time to reach out to this person. And it's funny because if I don't do it the first time, like it'll like nag at me, like it'll come back usually, or their name will come up, or, it'll just like ping me again until like maybe 3 or 4 times. And sometimes we'll run into each other or the conversation will just start happening or whatever. But when we start to connect that way, that's the authentic connection. And it's like, I'm not calling you because I need you for something. I'm not calling you because I believe you're sad or that you need my help. I'm calling you because in our allowance of connection and authenticity, I feel you, and my higher self is just telling me to call you, or you're calling me, or whoever's calling me telepathically. And so we're just going to connect. And sometimes if I don't do that, like I said, I'll just run into the person. We'll just cross paths anyway. And it's just really funny how it always happens. So when we allow that connection, it's so much easier, more flowing. And we can feel each other without judging the feelings. A friend that I talked to the other day, I was just guided to ask, how are you? And apparently they needed to talk about like a bunch of stuff. And that was great. Because, in my connections with those, I commit myself, to the self-love and authenticity. And in that connection, whatever that connection is, whatever it presents itself as, I do it from a place of love, right? So, of course, we're going to have our egoic connections. Of course, we're going to have like our roles that we play and all that kind of stuff. But what's really important is coming to this place of really knowing we're all equal on this. We're all here together to walk each other home, right? I love that quote. And looking at this person's death, I think it's really important. I think one of the biggest messages is not looking at the death itself, but looking at that it seems to be a shock to everybody who knew this individual. And the question is, did anyone ever connect? Like, did anybody like, we think, okay, that person is so prominent, they're okay. Well, what's really interesting? Look at I was thinking about this. Look at like celebrities, like big time celebrities or royalty or, you know, politicians or whatever. Like they all have typically like a PR person because they have to hold a certain role, they have to hold a certain face. And many of them have these like messes of lives and whatever because, and I think it gets perpetuated because it's like, oh, well, you know, just hide that. And you just need to have this face. And the more, like I want to say human, but the more that we show that we're all working through our stuff. And I could be a fabulous actress, or I could be a fabulous speaker, a fabulous teacher, a fabulous spiritual leader, and still have stuff. It connects us in a much more pure and authentic way than if we just hold somebody up on a pedestal. And that's part of what's really important about getting rid of the pedestal altogether. And I have made it a focus of mine. Sandy says, I've always loved that about you, Angela, your willingness to be authentic in every situation. My authenticity just took another leap last weekend, lol. And then she said, yes, those natural organic connections. You don't have to work at them or make them happen. They just happen. Those are the best. They are the best connections. But, you know, the thing is, I don't like and that's part of what we accept, right? When we start stepping into a role, we start to think, which then comes from the ego of, I have to act this way. I have to be this way, even if it's not even conscious. Like, okay, well, I have this. Now here's the thing. As we are remembering more and more in consciousness, we get to this place of saying, I recognize I have this emotion. I recognize it's ego or you know, separation based, and I'm observing it and I'm allowing it to flow through, but I'm not going to give it energy, right? So there's a difference. And Sarah and I were talking about this on our podcast Monday. You should go look at the Ascended World to really sort of get the basic of this discussion that started early this week. But, you know, there's this fine line too, right? So we talk about, well, I don't want to talk about it because it gives it more energy, right? So we get to that and it's like, okay, I see it and I observe it and I accept it and I'm allowing it to flow through and I'm not going to give it any more energy. But here's the thing. Or let's just use and. However, sometimes, like, you know, like as we're more and more conscious, we're using these tools of remembrance to help us, whether it's energy work or whatever, but words, connections, sometimes those are the tools that enable us to reflect something back to ourselves that we can't otherwise see. And it's not necessarily getting an opinion from somebody, because then we kick into that, oh, well, you should do this or you shouldn't do this or whatever. But what if we just asked questions? What if we just connected? And what if we just listened to each other, like really just listened? And sometimes just hearing myself say something, like in a moment of like a couple, like, was that 2 weeks ago now, a week and a half ago, I was on the phone with a friend and I was having just a cranky couple hours and something came up that I didn't even realize was there. It was like, bleh, right? And I was talking to my friend and I just said, you know, I'm just going to be frank about this. I'm just going to go right into it. And and this is somebody who I respect and love, and I would do nothing less for. And we had a very, very honest and authentic conversation. And we talked about it. We talked about my irritation. We talked about what I understood was under it. And and she did say, well, yeah, I can see that. And I can see this too, and and pointed out a couple of things. And sometimes just listening to myself say it and having that place where we can share, you know, heart to heart, without like, you know, like you should do this or shouldn't do this, because that's what we tend to fall into, right? And then we value whether the other person like takes our advice and whatever. But if we're just in this together, it's like, okay, I'm going to hold this space, and I love you. And so I'm going to hold this space in love as you are me and I love myself, and allow you to, well, we want to call it vent, right? Allow you to vent, allow you to share, to expand on what it is that you're holding, that has bubbled up to the surface, that might not be, non-dual, right? Not like non-ego, right? It's probably ego-based, and it's fine to be observant to it and to let it bubble up. Yes, Sandra says, listen to understand, not to respond. Exactly. And that's a big habit that many have, about the listening to respond. versus just listening and holding space. And, part of my profession and what I do and having sessions with people and whatever is just holding space. So I'm very used to doing that, but not many people are used to doing that for me because of the fact that I'm the one who was always holding and doing that for them. But the thing is, but that's okay. And so, like I said, that's okay. And it's okay. And as I've changed my energy around that, saying I don't have to play that role, right? That I have to be everybody's shoulder, but or that I'm only deserving of being the one that everybody shoulder they cry on, and not for somebody to listen to me. When I changed all that, then I developed different nature of a relationship where I have closer relationships where we can do that. And yet it's not a dependency. It's a, hey, can we just talk? And like I said, a lot of times it just comes back to us. Doing that is another level of authenticity that we're also not used to allow somebody the space of their own path without judging it. And like I said, to go back to this person's death and to those who are very surprised because of, her being a spiritual leader in the area and all that kind of stuff. The thing is to take down those masks of the roles that we expect, right, that prevent the authenticity of truly connecting, so that we can see. So it's funny, and I'll go back to just a quick thing about death and looking at it from this perspective that death is just a transition from one state to another. It's a graduation or whatever. So there's a woman who I've been working with for a number of years now who's imprisoned and has come a very long way in terms of self-responsibility, self-love, bigger consciousness. And people think that's sort of ironic, right, that she's imprisoned and has come to this, but that's what she set up for so that she could, right? We all have our own thing. And I know many people who are imprisoned and walking free. So, it's just a matter of perception. So anyhow, so she has changed so much over the time I've known her. And there was one point where one of her best friends killed herself in prison. And this woman was in for life. And she had been committed for an act of vengeance on somebody who had raped her daughter. So she was in for life because it was quite an act of vengeance. And so she had come to this place of resolution and acceptance for what she had done. She understood the anger, the rage that had bubbled up within her and what she had held inside her. And in this place of self-awareness, had said at some point, had told her closest friends at some point, I'm probably going to kill myself. And when I was told this by my client, when it happened, she said it wasn't a matter of if she would do it, it was just when. Because she and I have had multiple discussions, and not just with me, but she's talked about with others, is well, I've come to acceptance and resolution of all of that. And I see my part and I see what I did. And I see what purpose it served. And I don't see the purpose of me having to spend another, 40 years here. Because I think I'm done. And so she chose to go. And it wasn't that, and so I'm not looking at it as, they enabled it, or they didn't, because they didn't know when she would actually do it. I mean, she had an entire life of being in prison, so it could be any time. And she did. And I thought that was really, honestly, quite an awakened perception and position to take, to be able to see where somebody was. And it was funny because one of the conversations my client told me she had with this friend was, before she went, was, I guess she was brought up Catholic, and she goes, I don't believe I'm going to go to hell for committing suicide. She goes, I believe I just needed to come to resolution and acceptance and self-forgiveness and apology and everything so that I could move on. And that's where I am. And I thought, wow, that's such a connection and such an honest and authentic way to be connected with each other, to go, to be able to say that, not just to her, but I know to other people apparently, and things like that. So it's not it's not, and this can happen whether it's in prison or, in life or whatever. And again, it's changing the whole perception of what death is, and what it's about. And if we get to a place where it's time to go, it's time to go, whatever that looks like. The key is for us to really connect and know each other and listen and open our hearts, and to stop talking just to have somebody hear us, or to, like, as Sandra said, listen to respond. But instead to hold space for each other as we are going through this journey home together, to getting through this evolution, this completion and resolution of this particular version of this set of lessons in duality and separation, so that we can move on to our next big play or to the next level, or whatever we want to call it, to remember the next level, to not have to incorporate this as part of it anymore. And so this sounds so very foreign in the way we see things, but it's so very important in terms of allowing us to be authentic from a different place, allowing ourselves to be who we are, and allowing everyone around us to be who they are too, and not holding them up to expectations and roles or whatever, except for the understanding that you and I are both God Goddess. You and I are both source embodied, and we are both amazing and perfect and magnificent and all powerful, and you are perfect in your set of lessons that you chose and to embody, and I am perfect in mine. And in that, let's hold each other's hand and hold space together, so that we can encourage each other to fulfill what it is we need to fulfill. So, or what it is we've decided to fulfill. So look at that this week. Look at that with the way you're interacting with other people. Look at that with the way you are listening and paying attention. And it's not just, should I call this person, or I haven't called them in a long time, so I should call them, but listen to guidance. Listen to the messages you're getting and giving to yourself. Is it time for me to, like, all of a sudden it's just like, oh, it's not, is it? It's time for me to reach out to this individual for whatever. There have been times I have literally called somebody and been like, hey, I'm not even sure why, but I was guided to call you. Or I'm not even sure why, but I was guided to have lunch with you or to get together. So let's just connect and see where we're connecting and what's, in common. And every single time it's always aligned in some beautiful synchronistic way. And when we really do that, then we can really enjoy each other at a different level. And we don't have to be like, we don't have to say, okay, because you're my friend, I have to see you X amount of times a week, or X amount of times a month, or X amount of times a year. But when, like, I know our connection is always there. And I know that when it's time for us to be together, we'll be together. Like, I have so many friends all over the place. I have even friends that are local to me. I have friends that live 15 minutes away that I won't see for an entire year. And then all of a sudden we'll be like, oh, it's time for us to get together, and we'll go off for a day. And we have a fabulous time. And it's like no time has passed, because none has. There's like, time isn't, is an illusion. And it's just, okay, it's time for us to connect and just have fun. And then, okay. And then we go off on whatever the rest of our journeys are. But we've touched base where we've agreed to touch base. And it's just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful way of connecting in a much different way. So look at that within your relationships. And if you step back and look at the way we're connecting with each other, and we change that one thing, I think it would really, really change the way that we can be authentic with ourselves, with each other, and really help each other along in ways that we're not like surprised about anymore, that we can support each other in ways that we can allow for that full embodiment and full realization of what we are here to do and fulfill. So look at that this week and just listen and pay attention and connect, and really just be present with where you are and who you're with. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me. This is Angela Coulter for this week's Living the Shift. Have a good one. See ya.